Hello, BookTube. So this video I didn't give as much thought of into making, but I've been watching some BookTube videos and I've been really into considering their challenges and if you haven't seen on other channels, there's this new challenge that's been going around, or it's a revival of an old challenge, the 100 books challenge, where you read 100 books that you own before you buy any more books, any new books. And that challenge really does appeal to me because I buy I buy a lot of books, especially not this year, but 2022. If you look, or 2021, if you look at my numbers for the amount of money I spent on books, it's absurd. And I created a lot of my bookshelf or my own library in that year alone because I had a lot of money to spend and I had a lot of books that I wanted to read, and so now it's created this um, problem where I'm buying books at a rate that's way higher than what I can read, and it bothers me. And I know that it doesn't usually bother a lot of people, but I want to read these books. These are not books that I'm just buying because they look nice on the shelf. And so that 100 book challenge really appealed to me, and I wanted to give it a try. And so this past summer, I started the 100 book challenge and I got through a whopping 9 books. And that bothered me because I caved in and I bought some more books. I think what made me cave was a really good deal I saw on eBay. And and uh and then after that little breach, then I went to a used bookstore and I just bought like what 20 bucks or 15 books or something. So I just completely caved. But that number, 9 books out of 100, that's barely even 10%. And I found that, and I've been thinking about what some other booktubers have been saying or talked about word count. I think it was Micah Cummins and Greg at Another Bibliophile Reads, where they're considering, or they have their own challenge of reading based on page count and not based on the number of books that you read. Because the way I initially conceived of the 100 book challenge for me personally was I had to read the complete volume. I couldn't just, if I have like a volume that had multiple, here, I'll show a prompt. Here's a prompt example. The philosophy, or this is a history of philosophy, volumes 1, 2, and 3 by Frederick Copleston. These are 3 volumes in one big fat book. Normally, these 3 that are in here would be printed on their own, but I wanted to get the big fat 1 volume. This is what, 1,500 pages. So in my original conception of the 100 book challenge, I would have counted this as 1 book, even though this is technically 3 volumes, and I could buy these 3 volumes individually as each their own volume, and then I could have read it that way, counted it as 3 books. But now I'm looking back at that, and I think that's the wrong way for me to approach this challenge, because I want to read most of the books on my shelf before I read any more books, or before I buy any more books. I really like that challenge. And then that's made me consider that instead of doing a 100 books challenge, I might do a page count challenge instead, something absurd, at least for me. Because that, like I was saying before, those 9 books that I read before I caved are a bit deceptive. It doesn't sound like I read very much compared to the challenge that I set for myself. But in those 9 books, I included this chunkster and this chunkster. This is Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, which is, in my edition here, is almost 1,000 pages. And then this is Le Morte-d'Or by Thomas Malory, which is also almost 1,000 pages. Yeah, they're at least in the 900s in page count. And so these are both counted in those 9 books that I was reading. But I think that counting these as one book is deceptive, because if I want to read 100 books, I might just be more tempted to read shorter works on my shelf instead of reading the big fat books that I love to read, because even though I'm a slow reader, I love reading fat books like this. And so when I first heard about that, the word count challenge, it really got me thinking, because I don't normally count. I don't have a book goal for each year. I don't say I'm going to read 50 books this year or anything. I've never done that, because for this very reason, because I love fat books and because I know that I'm a slower reader. So what I've been thinking of is changing that 100 books challenge into a word count challenge, because what was it, this fall, I did actually start this. I got 267 pages into this, and I stopped deliberately. I don't usually DNF, and I'm not considering this as a DNF. It's just that this was too dense and slow going for me at the time. And if I was doing a word count challenge, these 260 some pages would count in my challenge, even though I didn't finish the complete volume. So this would have been useless reading, I should add. And it was the same thing that goes with this book. This is a textbook, The End of the European Era, 1890 to the present. It's a history textbook I had to read over a year ago for a history class. And this book covers way more than what we covered in that history class. And so I only got 328 pages into it. And because it was such an enjoyable reading experience, I would love to read the remaining parts of the entire rest of the book. And if I did a word count instead of a just physical book count, I could count these pages without being deceptive and counting this as a have read book, even though I started this and didn't finish. And the other issue is with essays and short stories. I have a lot of short story collections, and I do have a few essay collections. And I want to read them, but I don't, because I find it more difficult to just kind of read it in chunks. And so, but I really would like to read them. So, for example, I have this. This is the Library of America Collected Essays of Wendell Berry, 2 volumes, and they're both around 800 pages each. Just essay collections from like the 60s to the present day. And then I have this big fat chunkster. This is the essays of George Orwell. Huge book, over 1,000 pages for sure. Yeah, 1,300. And then for short stories, I have a lot of anthologies like this. This is the Norton Anthology of Short Fiction, which is itself over 1,300 pages. And for when I was thinking of previously, when I first started the 100 book challenge, I would have just avoided these like the plague, because this volume would never have counted unless I read the entire thing from front to back. And I was never going to read this thing from front to back, even if it's enjoyable to read, because this is like many different authors, and it's just something that's easier to just dip into instead of diving in and reading it all the way through. So if I do the 100 book challenge, I would do it in a different way. I would do it page count challenge, and so that my essays, the essays I read, the short stories that I read, the books that I don't do DNF, but I pause and I don't, if I think that it's not the right time to finish it for me, like I read Plato, but then I paused right before he started his discussion of Aristotle, and I'm not ready for his discussion on Aristotle if his discussion on Plato is any example or any example of what his discussion of Aristotle will be. So I want this challenge to. I think the page count challenge will be a lot more fair towards my own reading, and it'll incentivize me to read short stories and essays that I really would like to get to without feeling like I have to read the entire volume for it to count as one book on the challenge. And I think there was something else I wanted to say. Oh yes, what I wanted to add is about e-reading. I'm not sure if I'm going to count e-reading as counting towards the page count challenge, because e-reading has evolved for me to be something. It's just as addicting when it comes to buying books, but I find it a little bit more justified because the price that I can buy a bunch of ebooks for is a fraction for the amount of used book or new or even used in some cases, the fraction of that price. So for this challenge, if I was to do the page count challenge, I would still be allowed to buy two types of books. I would be allowing myself to buy on sale ebooks on the Kobo store, because that's what the device that I have, but only if they're on my wish list, because Kobo sends an email out if there's a book on your wish list that comes on sale. And so if it's like $15, then it'll be on sale for $2.99. And that's not something I'm willing to pass up, because when else would I be able to get the text of a book that I want to read for $3, unless I'm at a really good bookstore and there's a lot of chance involved, because you don't ever know what you're going to find at a used bookstore. So that I'll allow myself to buy, but only that when they send that email out that tells you something on your wish list has gone on sale. That's it. And then the other one is my Western Canon starter kit, or my Western Canon reading list. I misname it. The Western Canon reading list. I don't have nearly all the volumes that I need to go through that. And so once I get to a spot on my list, say for example, one that immediately comes to mind is the Julius Caesar, the Landmark Julius Caesar. I have Landmark edition there and the Landmark edition there. For Herodotus and Thucydides, the Landmark Julius Caesar I do not own yet, but that's the one edition of Julius Caesar that I would like to read him once I get to him on my list. So I won't be buying Julius Caesar now. It'll only be an immediate buy once I actually need to read Julius Caesar. That'll be the only two excuses that I allow myself for buying books. So I don't know what I have before Julius Caesar, but I know but once I reach just the book before Julius Caesar, when I'm reading that book, then I can purchase the volume that I need to read Julius Caesar, and that limits me, so that when I'm in the Middle Ages or something and I'm reading, say, Thomas Aquinas, I'm not gonna all of a sudden purchase a novel from the 20th century that is also on my list just because I want to buy a book. So I do have some restrictions in that area, if that makes sense. I think that's it. That's all I wanted to say. I hope this isn't as long-winded as some of my other videos have been, but I really needed to discuss this because it's something that's been on my mind. And I'll leave a link to the videos below that I talked about. And I really enjoyed the videos that kind of got the wheels rolling in my head. So I think, just to conclude, my challenge will probably be 80,000 words, or pages, I mean, 80,000 pages, which will take me a long time, because how I visualize these word count challenges is in how many 1,000-page books that would count. So 80,000 words is basically equivalent to reading this book 80 times. And I don't read 1,000-page books very quickly. And I only read around 40 to 50 books a year, just based on how slow I am to read and the thick size of the books that I like to read. So this will be a slow challenge, and I think it's a challenge that I'm willing to take, and one that's more doable based on all the books that I have sitting on my shelf. And so yeah, that's it. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you, BookTube.